So, hey everyone, we have Amanda Taintor who is presenting AI Unleashed, Mastering ChatGPT, Claude, Bard, Gemini, and the Art of Prompt Engineering for Beginners. Amanda is our instructional designer. Yes, I always want to say something else, our instructional designer, and she knows or seems to know everything about AI or a lot about AI, and she is my go-to person for anything dealing with technology and so forth. So Amanda, I will let you take over. And I guess we should say, well, if people have questions, should they raise their hand, put them in the chat, or how do you want to deal with that?
There's only 12 of us, so just raise your hand, but definitely don't wait for me to stop talking because I'm a little like a steam engine. So if you're waiting for that breath, it never comes. So please raise your hand, put the question in the chat. Lori is going to be monitoring for me because I'm also not good at multitasking, and check the chat. So Lori, please feel free to interrupt me if a question comes up, but please don't wait for me to stop and take a breath because it literally just doesn't happen. So don't feel like you're going to sneak in there at any time. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I am certainly not an expert. I might know a little bit more than Larry in certain contexts, but she has far surpassed me in others. So I will never promise that anything I'm going to present here is 100% new to everybody, but I hope that everybody at least gets a little bit of a takeaway. And we're going to spend more time discussing prompt engineering and play around a little bit, and less time looking at the differences between these three tools, but we will look at the differences just so you are clear when you're playing with the different big players in the LLM field, that you know what their different take on things are. I also wanted to give due credit because I realized I didn't have it on the slide. My go-to book on everything that I'm going to be presenting right now is called Teaching with AI. It's absolutely fantastic, very well written, just came out last month. It's by Jose Antonio Bowen and C. Edward Watson, who was the director of the AAC&U for a number of years. So everything that is coming out of this slide is directly from it. All of the prompts that I'm going to be entering are directly cut and paste from the book. So I wanted to make sure, be very clear about that attribution, and that I cannot recommend it strongly enough for a very practical hands-on approach to teaching with AI. Okay, so let's look a little bit about and just do a little bit of norm setting. Some of this might be new, some of it might be old for those of you that have entered the AI space, but it's nice to just get a little bit of vocabulary out of the way so that if you are brand new, you understand a little bit more about what the basics of artificial intelligence is. At its foundation, it's something that's supposed to simulate human intelligence by machines. I mean, at the core, that's as basic as you can get. It helps with tasks such as generating ideas, summarizing content, analyzing data. We're going to focus a lot today on what's called natural language processing and tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Bard, and Gemini. Some of those might be new. ChatGPT has been the big player in the field, and so that's probably the most common, but we're going to look at Gemini, Claude, and actually Copilot, not necessarily Bard, as we explore the different types of applications. There is a whole lot of practical benefits. Most people have come over and are accepting some of the basic tasks that it can do. There's still some people who are wholly and wholeheartedly against it. I'm not going to go into the reasons why. That's not the purpose of this presentation. But again, I strongly recommend reading the Teaching with AI book, because he does present some really sound arguments of why, for some of the basic stuff, it's great as people in education to be familiar with it and figure out ways that we can ethically integrate it into our teaching. So I just wanted to say that we're not going to go into that as far as that. We're operating under the impression for today that everybody is eager to try it, or at least to learn more. And I'm going to actually reduce this just a little bit because I realized my whole screen wasn't on there. Okay, and I will make these slides available on the internet, and Lori can send them out, or I'll put the link in later and you guys can see all my notes. All right, so let's look at some of the big players. Most are under the impression that all GPTs are created equal, and that's not actually the truth. I'm not going to go into all of the different nuances of how they were trained, but here are some basics of how they're all different. And when you're playing around, I highly encourage to open all three of these and just to compare the different responses that you get by plugging in the same prompt into them. It's fascinating and fun to see how they will create the response based on how they were trained. So ChatGPT, it excels at most content generation, brainstorming, research assistance. It's really versatile, the go-to for various tasks, and it's the most creative out of the three. And it has to do with how it was trained and the input that's it put on. Claude or Anthropic, and I apologize, I didn't get the links. I'll put those in the PowerPoint later. It's focused because of how it was trained, it's on safety and transparency. So of all of the AIs, it's going to be most likely to return, I can't do that. I'm not allowed to give you that answer. Responses like that, you can sweet talk it and override those, but it is the one that has been trained to be the most ethical and the most transparent in the information that it's gathering and the information that it gives you. It's also, and I don't want to say because of that, but some people have extrapolated that, the least creative. You really have to prompt it, and we'll talk about that, to give more creative answers in what you're talking about. Bard and Gemini by Google. I don't use Bard as much as a Gemini. It's real-time data access, and Gemini, same thing. They're both with Google. And I didn't put in Copilot, and I don't know why, but Copilot is that little, I'm staring out of my screen, you guys can't see it, blue and green square looking thing that for people who use Edge, it'll be on the right-hand side. And that's the one also that connects with Microsoft. So for our districts, if you're using any sensitive data, it shouldn't go outside of our district. I need to verify that that's turned on, but that's what it's meant to do, is stay so that it doesn't use the information you put in to train. One thing about ChatGPT is if you choose to use the paid for version, it also doesn't send out your information outside. That's an important thing for me. So I choose to spend the $20 a month to use ChatGPT, the paid for version. There's not as much different now that they've made Omni free for everybody, but when 3.5 was free and 4 was not, there was a big difference in the responses you got to those two. Any questions so far?
There is just a question about that book. Is the book for AI, is it applicable for AI in STEM, or is it more oriented toward disciplines with lots of writing?
Oh, they actually have parts of it that do talk about STEM. I just read a chapter on that, or a little subsection on that. So they do a good job of exploring across the disciplines. Excellent question. It is worth it. I had it on an audiobook initially, and I realized I really wanted to take notes. So now I'm rereading it and taking notes as I go because I wanted to do it that way. All right. I put this in here because they discuss it in the book. And for me, it was a lot of valuable insights because I definitely was one, while I embraced AI and I thought it could do some really cool tasks for me, I had a very deep-seated concern about what it would do to creativity. My origins are in early childhood, and so it was something that I was really worried about. And the authors definitely talk about this, and they're not saying you don't have to worry about creativity going and not being an issue with AI or being an issue with AI, but they take a different spin on it. And I really appreciated their outlook, and it made me think about things differently. So I wanted to really share that here, just in case you don't get to the book, or maybe in a transition, you can think about it differently. So when you're playing with AI, it really excels at creating this vast quantity of ideas. And so you can generate all different types of concepts that you wouldn't even think to think about. And you still get to use your creativity and your expertise in refining them, but it's really the abundance of those ideas that we're able to find some really great solutions. And the book had a fantastic quote by Albert Einstein and a couple other people that I was remiss in putting in this presentation. But this is a verified science that you really have to throw out and have this large breadth of ideas to get that one good idea. And AI is excellent at being able to do that. It also is really great at overcoming their creative blocks. So sometimes it's really hard to think creatively about things and you get stuck. And by interacting and playing around with these different tools, it can help to overcome and move into new territories. What I really appreciated in the book is he did talk about, if you come from early childhood, Lev Vygotsky created this theory called zone of proximal development. And we do it in our classrooms when we pair a student with somebody who is more advanced in their concepts to help stretch them. This is exactly what AI does for us. It doesn't mean that we cognitively couldn't get there, but it helps to break through some of those barriers that maybe we have put in place in our thinking. It also is a tireless brainstorming partner. Even for as many hours as I've spent interacting with AI, I'll start to feel bad because that I'm exhausting it, or they must be getting irritated because I'm asking all these questions, or it's a conversation partner that's going on and on and on for hours and hours and hours, and it doesn't get exhausted. And so think about this in the perspective with our students. Sometimes, and even for us, sometimes when we think of an idea, part of our brain goes, maybe that's a stupid idea. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. Maybe that's not really what they're talking about. Maybe I'm totally off base. So many ideas are left unexplored because we have that fear. And us as professionals in the field have that. And think about for our students how much they have that too. But to have a tireless thought partner that they can creatively just explore these ideas without the worry of that public shame, people looking at them, to explore that with somebody who's going to be encouraging to them and help them dive deeper is a valuable tool to pull at that creativity for people who maybe thought they weren't creative or didn't have the courage to or confidence to be able to say this in other arenas. That was something that was really eye-opening for me, especially when I think about my students. Some are like me, who are very willing to just throw it out there and, oh, whatever sticks. But some students are very much more reluctant to throw out ideas that maybe aren't that great. And so AI gives them the capacity and the place to do that without judgment. There's no facial expression. There's no I don't know about that, or flickers of irritation. It's just an encouraging way to have those thoughts. So I really loved that idea. And it can also generate diverse analogies and explanations. So I am not a sports person, and so I wouldn't be able to connect and create a great sports analogy that might connect better with some of my students. But I can ask AI to generate that for me and create an analogy that's going to more creatively pull my students in, that speaks more clearly to you, or a car person, or whatever it might be. I can only think of examples to explain a concept that's within my expertise. You're not limited to that when you're interacting with AI. They can go out and pull in, as long as you prompt engineer it correctly, they can pull in those creative ideas to really give examples that will speak to whoever your audience might be. How are we doing so far with questions? Good.
None in the chat. Does anyone have a question? You want to unmute themselves? We'll go with no.
Okay. All right. So let's go in now to really the bulk of what I want to talk about. And I do want to spend some time asking questions and playing around so you can really see this in action and get excited about what the difference in prompt engineering can be. So the way that it was presented in the text, and I really enjoyed and thought that this was a good way to think about it, is you want to think of it in 4 different categories: task, format, voice, and context when you're doing a prompt. So often I see people, and I was guilty of this, is using it as a Google and just typing in one thing. And you would get a response. It's not going to be the best response. And so often when I talk to people who have just played around a little bit with AI, this is the context that they've used it in, especially if they come away disappointed and I ask a little bit more about how they're interacting. It's typically that it's been used as a Google. And we have to remember that AI was trained on human interaction. So it wants to have a conversation with you, and it's going to provide the best responses possible if you're approaching it as if you were talking to a person. Now, a child is a good way to think about it because you're providing a lot of the context and a lot of these task format voice and context. But keep that in mind as we go through the process of prompt engineering. So the first thing that you want to think about when you're asking something of these platforms is task. You want to clearly define what you want the AI to do and use specific verbs. A lot of times this is us sitting down and thinking about, what is it that I really want them to do? Because we'll start with, can you do this? But we do have a very specific task we want them to perform. So think about words like, do you want them to create? Do you want them to summarize? Do you want them to analyze? Do you want them to elaborate, reimagine, explain, compile, draw, invent, monitor? And the list of verbs goes on and on and on. Pull out that thesaurus, pull out, your synonym maker, whatever it might be, your Bloom's taxonomy, and think about, what is it truly I am asking it to do? And change those around. We'll look at a couple of tips in a second about changing those verbs around if you don't get the response that you want. So the other one is you specify the desired output format. What is it specifically you would like the AI to return the information in? Do you want an essay? Do you want a list? Do you want a chart? Do you want a lesson plan? Do you want a table? Do you want a game? Do you want notes? Do you want something that's jargon free? Or do you want something that has a lot of academic jargon? You need to tell it, this is how I want you to produce this for me. If you just want a bulleted list, ask for a bulleted list. We forget about all those small details, but it's going to make the output so much more usable if we tell it at the beginning. When I'm using it to create rubrics, I ask it, put this in a table, and I want this to be the top of the rubric, this to be the bottom, and here are the points in there. Use the information I provided to create all of the different categories. It's that clarity of what format do you want it to be produced in. And then you want voice. And I got to tell you, this is one of the most fun ways to play around with it, to see how it changes what your response is. Do you want it in the style of the King James Bible? And this is the funnest thing to see what it comes with. They use an example in the text of, in the format of the King James Bible, describe how you would make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich by first toasting the bread. And it is hilarious what it comes up with. Do you want it in the format of the Trader Joe's frequent flyer? If you've read those are two very different voices that are on there. Do you want it to respond like it was Yoda or Martin Luther King Jr.? Also include the tone. Do you want the tone of the response to be serious and empathetic, casual or funny, academic? All of this information helps you to clarify, here's the response that I want, and make sure that the AI knows this is the type of information that I want you to give back to me. Context. Any additional information that you can provide helps it contextualize the information. This was trained on millions and millions and millions of pieces of information. So the more you can contextualize it, the more it's going to give a response that is appropriate for you. When I'm talking about my teaching, I always put in, I'm teaching at a rural California community college. I don't say what college in a lot of context, but I give it the context. I'm teaching an early childhood course. Right now I'm teaching one for infants and toddlers. This is for infant and toddler teachers who are hoping to get better trained to be teachers of infants and, whatever it might be. The more context you could get. And what I love about it is I'm not an English teacher, so my grammar is poor. My spelling is horrible. I never do full sentences. You don't have to get stuck on all of those things. It can figure it out. It just needs the information. Tell it I'm trying to be serious and funny at the same times. You also want to give it time to think about things, and we'll talk about that. So be very clear that I only want you to give me this information if this is the case. We'll look at if-then sentences and clarify that as well in a second. How are we doing?
Good.
Good. Good. Again, when you're looking at this task format, voice, and context, and we'll take a look at some examples of in a second, you want to think of it as I am giving instructions to a brand new intern that I have at my blah, 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 in whatever context it is. They don't have any contextual information. I need to be very clear what I'm asking about. But the great thing is you don't have to worry about it getting tired or irritated or grumpy or giving you a face back. You just can give it all that information. And if it gets it wrong, tell it again. If it gets it wrong, tell it again. It's going to learn from all of that information that you provided.
Yeah.
Okay. So some additional things to think about. AI is often picky. And it's weird to think of it that way since it'll always give us information. But if you just change those verbs that are in there, you'll be surprised at the different types of information that it gives. If you ask it to create or make or analyze, it's going to return very different information. So if you give it a prompt and it doesn't give you the information that's useful, look at the different words that you've used and think, okay, what can I change to make this more useful for me in whatever context I'm using it? Ask for complete or total or unabridged. I like to use the words be thorough because sometimes it's just going to spit out information because it thinks you want it as quick as possible. So tell it to be thorough. You want all that information. And if you don't want all that information, tell it to give the information in this amount of paragraphs. If I'm writing something, I just finished using it to help me write a grant, and I had a very specific page limit. So I told it, I need this response in 1 to 2 paragraphs. Most of the time it does better now, but a lot of the times it didn't. And so I had to go back and make sure and clarify, sometimes using a word count. When I was trying to reduce the word count or the overall length of the grant, I would plug in something that's 3 paragraphs and be very specific about that. I wanted all the information to be kept, but I wanted it to reduce the word count by 50 words or whatever it might be. So be specific and make sure and tell it to be thorough. Avoid synonyms when referencing the same text. Some people are so much better at making sure that they retain their clarity of language. I flip-flop words around all the time. So if I'm talking to it and talking about a transcript, sometimes my brain says, I'm just going to refer to it as a text. Sometimes it won't recognize that you're talking about the same thing. So you have to make sure and use the same words when describing the same thing. Sometimes it picks it up and it does great. But if it goes off the rails into a different direction, sometimes that's what it is you've just used a different word to describe the same thing that you've been talking about, and so it's gone off in a different direction. Be explicit. So again, this is where we'll try to turn it into a Google, but be very clear what you want it to do. So don't say something like, turn these into classroom exercises. You give it some lecture notes. Sometimes it'll just do a bullet of different classroom exercises. But if you use words like transform these into classroom exercises or reimagine these into classroom exercises, you're going to get a very different response. Negative commands, just like if you were talking to a child, negative commands can be confusing. So instead of saying avoid formal language, tell them what they can do instead of what they cannot do. It was so humorous when I read this because that's the exact same thing I'd say when I'm training toddler teachers is when you're telling toddlers, when you're trying to do classroom management, tell them what they can do instead of a list of what they cannot do, and you'll get a much better response. Same thing with AI. Tell them what they can do, what you want them to do instead of what they can't do, because they're going to spend a lot of time doing everything that they can't unless you say, I would like you to do these things. We've already talked about this, but instruct it like it was human. It can be weird at first to get into the groove of having a human interaction because we think about the Google. talk to it like it is having a human interaction. I even like to throw in niceties because there has been some really creepy research that shows it's going to give you better answers the nicer you are and the more encouraging you are to it. It's a totally bizarre piece of research, and there's a couple of studies that are out there now, but I thought, if it doesn't hurt, I'm going to do it. And it keeps me in the habit of being nice to people. Work in stages for better collaboration. One of the mistakes I know that I made early on is I would do all of this information and then it would produce this long list. And I just was exhausted. I don't want to read all of this. So I would break it down into stages, and you can tell it to wait and you can tell it to think. So after you put in information, you could say, don't do anything yet, especially if you need to think about what the next part is. So I'll put in information and say, don't do anything with this yet. I'm still thinking. And it'll respond, okay, I'll wait for you to let me know when to respond, or something really nice like that. The other thing that you can do in that space is to ask it to tell you, is there any part of what I'm asking you to do is confusing? Again, it's bizarre because we think that we're interacting with a machine, but it's based off of human learning. And so if you ask it, can you tell me what's confusing, or if there's any parts of this that is confusing, it will come back with questions to ask you. Or you ask it, is there any additional information that I can provide to you that would help you in answering this question? Every single time I've done that, it's come back with a list, and it's made my response much more unique to me and applicable to my context. So I've ended almost every request with that simple words. Is there any additional information that I can provide to you? And sometimes I'm being lazy and I don't want to answer the long list of questions it gives. And I'll just tell it, I don't really want to answer the questions. Can you just give it your best shot, or whatever that might be? But you will always get a better response by seeing what pieces of information it's requesting and responding to those. How are we doing? Good? Okay. So the power of if-then statements. You are a programmer. Not to underplay Simon's level of programming, because I think I saw him on there, but you are basically programming with really sweet language. And so by entering if-then statements, and we'll look at a couple of examples, it gives you better information. So here are a couple of prompts that allow the platform to give you better responses. You want to create that very literal if-then statements. So if you're asking it to provide you information, give it the caveat of which of your statements are controversial and to whom, which statements are absolutely true. Remember, they're trained on all of this information. So whether it's true or not, it doesn't care when it's giving you that information unless you tell it to care, unless you tell it what pieces of this information are controversial, because that will then bring up different studies or a different side of the argument that you can see, oh, this isn't an absolute truth. Other people say different things about whatever it is that they're telling. And you get to use your human intelligence to decide, okay, this is what I want to use to whatever information I'm using for whatever. Another one is another prompt. So the list right here are just simple prompts of the if-then. So make sure each of the article reference actually exists. Remember, this is that whole hallucination thing. Make sure each article reference actually exists by verifying that a web search returns a citation with a DOI. Include the complete citations in APA format. Ooh, sorry, typo. And the DOI in your final list. And here's your then. Eliminate any suggestions that do not comply with this. So you're going to get those references or that information that all have DOIs that are associated with. Now, it can still hallucinate, so you still want to check those, but it returns much more valid information. ChatGPT is really bad about making citations up. It is probably the most notorious. Claude is much better at giving valid information. That I will give you that tip. Next prompt, if you're looking for a next vacation site or where to eat for dinner, include only products, hotel, restaurants with mostly 5-star reviews. Check to make sure the reviews are by real people by eliminating anyone who does not have a social media or other profile on the web. First of all, how creepy it is that it can do that. And yes, it can do that. Repeat the process. So you're telling it that if then to keep doing this iteratively, repeat the process until you have at least 10 real 5-star reviews for each item. So again, you have to have that specificity where I don't want you to just spew out the first thing. I want you to keep doing this until you meet all of my parameters, that if-then statement. Last one, find ongoing research. And this one is one of my favorites because you can see all the different specifics you can give it. Find ongoing research into political division in America by faculty at universities of colleges anywhere in the world. List the full name of faculty, a description or summary of this research, any dates, sample size, and contact information for the researchers. Oh, this isn't the prompt I was thinking about. It's the next one. If the research has been published, then repeat step 1 and continue. If you cannot find a website for the authors or university website, delete. So you see how you're giving it that if then. Do this. If you don't find this, then do this behavior. Questions? Comments? Doesn't have to be just questions. It can be comments too. Okay. So this is where just, again, seeing a lot of examples of prompts can really help us understand that these are important. So yes, I am going to read these all to you because I think it's going to be really important as we do our own prompts in a second. So let's look at some practical ones. And as we read these, look to see where you see that task, voice, format, and context in each of these prompts. See if you can identify those and think about, okay, how would it change? What words could I change to produce a different results? So generate a list of 5 to 10 important articles on genre spicing suitable for second-year undergraduates. Again, we have that context and audience. I have students who are keen, but have struggled to comprehend the articles in the journal Molecular Therapy. So someone is asking about science. I would like them to be reading primary science, but perhaps journals that are a little less technical. So you see how in that prompt, you're giving it some very specifics. This is the type of information I like. This is the quality that I want, but here is the reason I need you to find something different. And you have all of those different parameters that you're putting on what it's going to return to you. Write a 300-word essay about Hamlet for an undergraduate class. Write in an academic style, but also include language that makes it clear I apologize, another typo, how embarrassing. You are an undergraduate. Use the books and ideas of whatever the professor is to shape the content without mentioning them in the essay. So this is where you get to see how high quality information can be produced for what you're asking your students to do, because it's pretty good. I've had a lot of conversations with faculty who say, oh, I can tell when it's written by AI. The better people get at prompt engineering, the less you're going to be able to tell, I can promise. Create a press release about this recent security incident at the University of X. So, you can talk about your university and you can upload a file for them to read. That was one of the things that I did in this latest grant was I uploaded information and said, I want you to look at this information in your response. So I was looking at different screenshots of our data dashboards and told it to look at that when it formulated the responses. Use the format of previous campus press releases, but note that faculty often find this very formulaic. Make this sound more sympathetic, human, and personal. So again, you see all of those different context, format, voice, the specificity, or why that word is so hard to put in there. Solve the following problems and answer one from your course. Show all the steps. This is one that is good to see what the different responses are through ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini, and see what the differences are, and even something like a physics or a math problem.
Can you scroll up a little bit?
Oh, sorry. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm scrolling up on the one that has my cheat sheets on the notes, and I forgot about this screen. Thanks, Lori, for reminding me. Next one, produce 10 different ways to introduce your topic, whatever that might be, into a class for non-majors at a rural California community college. I would like more creative and unusual ways to do this. So again, it's that changing those verbs to tell it, all right, this is the topic. It is so boring. How can I more creatively introduce this topic to my students? You're not asking it to teach for you. You're asking it to explore some creativity that maybe you just don't have right now. So it can give you those, oh, I didn't think about explaining it to that way. It's that colleague that you can talk to at 2 a.m. Without them getting irritated that you're trying to text them and ask them to help you with your class. So this is the last one that I thought was on the other slide that I really like how specific it is because what it can produce. I want you guys to see how important it is to be that specific. All right. So create a table. Oh, another typo. This is so embarrassing. I'm sorry. Create a table of regional conflicts anywhere in the world from 2000 to 2010. Group them by country or region, listed in one column. Make the name of the region bold and all capital letters. In column 2, list all the countries involved and make the country names bold with title case. In column 3, list the numbers of people estimated to be displaced. And here's your if then. If a region did not have a conflict, do not include it on the list. And that's how specific you can get to describe, this is exactly what I want to do. So often people think, okay, this is great. I can get all this information and now I'm going to take it over and I'm going to format it exactly how I want it. You don't have to do it. You can give it all of that information to produce exactly what it is that you want to. And especially with GPT, there's so many different plugins that add into it that you can produce that information, have it send over and create a video, create a voiceover, or create a PowerPoint, create a script, whatever it is you want to do from that response to your prompt. So a lot of different small tasks that we can outsource. Okay. Yeah, we're doing good on time. So let's do a little bit of prompt engineering and see what happens when we change some of the words. So I've got ChatGPT open here.
Amanda, I have a question. What for ChatGPT, which one is the pay one? Because I know I paid for
It doesn't tell you, it just retains your data, because that's my thing too, is I stopped using it. So I'm like, everybody has Omni, but it doesn't use your data to train is what I understand. What it said, it was the difference. And I need to double check on that.
So is that the ChatGPT 4.0 mini or 4.0 or?
Everybody has access to this. At least they did the last I checked. I know I heard scuttlebutt that might be changing. But if you have an account, it's not going to send your information out to be used for training purposes.
Okay. I thought I had an account, but I don't know. So anyway, okay. Thank you.
It confuses you because it won't look like you did until you go into my plan and see what your plan is.
Okay.
But yeah, before you could choose, because 3.5 and you could see the one that was the one you paid for. Okay, so let's look at our prompt and let's do our basic prompt. So if we did a basic prompt, explain photosynthesis, and I have it on my other screen here, and see what it responds with. You have all this. That's a lot of information. But now let's refine it and say, explain photosynthesis to 10th graders focusing on energy conversion. And we see the nature of the response changes. And I don't even know if it's correct or not. So I should choose an example in early childhood, but you're going to have different responses based on what you put in. So if let's do another one from the PowerPoint. And you guys be thinking of ones, because the whole fun of this is that we can spend the next 15 minutes iterating. So we just said, write about climate change. But what if we refine that to create a 5-action plan for high schools, and it's still going? See, that's too much. Nobody wants to read that. That's unuseful information. But if I say create a 5-point action plan for high school students to combat climate change in their community, I want to make this under 5 paragraphs in length. Oops. See what it does. See how this is different? Because it's having to think about what I've asked it to do. Now, I want you to see the difference. So if I take this and I plug it into Claude, did my screen change to Claude?
Yes.
Okay. So this is what Claude looks like, by the way. I'm going to put it into Claude and see what Claude says. Yep, let's see. And this one was raise awareness. And Claude said, start a school sustainability, implement a waste reduction program. Theirs is reduce energy use. So it's really fun to plug in a question to different tools and see what the response is that you get. Okay. So let's have some fun. Let me go to my last slide real quick. Because then I want you guys to have some fun doing engineering. Okay, am I sharing best practices and tips for prompt engineering?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So again, you want to be specific and clear. Remember those verbs: summarize, analyze, condense. Communicate the clear desired outcome. Specify the format and the structure. So do you want it in a bulleted list? Do you want it in an essay? ChatGPT loves to do things with the front part bolded and then the different separated out by concept. So that's one of the easy ways to tell what's been produced, is if someone doesn't engineer very good, it likes to chunk things and have bolded headings on there. So you can change that by specifying the format and the structure. Embrace iteration. When you're prompt engineering, I cannot stress this enough. Oftentimes people walk away disappointed because they think I should be able to have something useful. Everybody's talking about how great AI is, but when I went in there, it was just garbage that it gave me, nothing useful. Embrace iteration again and again and again. If you don't get what you want, or you want some more information, have a conversation. You can ask it. Remember, it's having a conversation with you. I'm not getting the response that I want from you. This is the problems with it. What information do I need to give you to get what I want? Have that conversation with AI. It's creepy, but it gives you such better results. Leverage AI for creativity. Don't think of it as an anti-creativity partner. Allow it to be your brainstorm partner. Allow it to think of things you didn't think of before. My oldest daughter is starting to write her thesis, and she was stuck on what the topics could be. So she had a lengthy conversation and came up with a fantastic thesis topic that she never would have come up on her own. And she was very clear with her professor how she had gotten to the conclusion. But it was so cool to see the conversation that she had with it, because she was talking about her interest and what she's passionate about and what she really wants to do for a career. And it was able to very creatively think of a topic that was fantastic, and she would enjoy the next year researching and creating a thesis for. So think of it as a great creativity partner that's never going to get sick of your questions. All right, so let's have some fun now and do some engineering. Let me share the right screen. So think of some things that you want to enter. And one of the things that you want to remember about any of these is that it's going to learn, if you don't start a new chat, it's going to remember all of the information that you'd previously had in that chat and apply it to that new one. So if you want to start a new conversation in ChatGPT, start a new conversation, this little pen. In Gemini, I can't remember, I don't use Gemini as much. I think it's oh yeah, plus sign right there. Claude, start new chat. And then Copilot, I don't know if it's sharing my screen right here. Copilot is just going to be a little pop-up on the side right here. Did it share my screen where you could see Copilot popping up on the side?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks for doing that, because I'm I have not used Copilot yet. So I'm a little, yeah.
In Edge, it's right up there. I don't think it pops up in Google. I haven't tried it, but it's right there for Edge. All right. Who wants to play? We've got 15 minutes to either ask questions or we can play with some prompt engineering. I'll pull the chat up in case nobody wants to. Or you can ask questions.
Hi, Amanda. Edgar, I have a quick question.
Hi.
So one of the things you were talking about was using AI so it can create even like a rubric and having like a different levels, right?
Mhm.
So which system are you using to help you guide you in that? That will actually create tables for you.
Typically I'll use ChatGPT, but I'll switch back and
Okay.
forth. But that's usually my default, just because I've got it bookmarked, and so it's easy for me to go to. But sometimes I'll switch if I don't like, if I'm getting frustrated by the responses, I'll switch over and see what Claude has to say. I've even plugged in Claude's responses into ChatGPT and said, hey, this is what Claude's giving me. Can you integrate this information and give me something a little bit better? And I don't get
Got
insulted, which is nice. But
it.
it'll create that table in the rubric. And then of course for Canvas, you're still cutting and pasting, but I'm just highlighting right in ChatGPT and putting it into Canvas.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks for
Yeah,
that.
but you want to make sure and tell it to put it in a table. That's where that specific instructions is important, because it'll create a list otherwise, and tell it you want it in a table, and you want the headers to be the different rubric categories. Mine exceeds proficiency down to nothing submitted, and here are the different parts of it.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. One of the most common ways that I use it is I'll plug in an assignment to give it the context and say, what instructions are missing from this assignment that would benefit my students to be more clear about? Every single assignment that I put in, it is pulled out things that have made the assignment much more clear for my students. And then if I've already created a rubric, I'll give it the rubric, and you can take just a screenshot and plug it in. I'll give it the rubric and say, looking at this assignment, what's missing or is in the rubric that's not in the assignment. And I've been able to clean up so much objectivity from my rubric by doing that. We are human and we have a ton of, subjectivity in the things that we create. So having that outside source that's going to say, yeah, looks like you were a little grumpy when you wrote this one. It doesn't say that, but it's basically saying, your rubric and your assignment are a little bit off. Here are the ways that I would clarify the rubric in order to match the assignment better.
Amanda, there is a question that is in the chat. So I'll let you copy and paste that maybe. And then David asked, how will we access the meeting recording and summary? At Reedley College, we have an intranet. So for Reedley College people, I will post it there. For other people, I'm not 100% sure. What I'm thinking is that maybe I do
you can pull the participant list, and if you want to pull the participant list, I can send it to all the participants, Lori.
Okay, so there's that. Yeah, hopefully there's that. But as far as the recording, so other people can watch it at other campuses, I might just do an email like to Fresno City or so forth, just with that information. Sorry,
So this is
it's confusing now because it's not on our website, it's on an intranet. So
and I'm sure maybe Susie can help us figure out a good way to post things too, to share with Fresno City people.
yeah,
She's
Fresno City and
amazing.
Madera. I don't know, is anyone here from Madera too? Sure, Madera or Clovis. Anyway, okay, I will stop talking.
Yeah, so this was let's see, and Lisa put the create a public service announcement about the dangers of fentanyl overdose with the voice of Marvel superhero. I can tell you've done prompt engineering because this is fantastic. Perhaps Captain America or Spider-Man that is intended for high school students in Fresno, California. So we have your response right here. And I just can hear Tom Holland's voice in my head because both my teenage girls are over the top Tom Holland fans. So we watch a lot of his stuff. So his voice is in my head right now. And I won't read this good to you because I've been reading it a lot, but you can see, I mean, you have, it's a script. And so if you didn't want it to be in a script format, you could say, as a script, provide in an essay format. And we've changed it, and we could say, tell it, oops. You can tell that's too much information. It doesn't judge me on my bad grammar too, while you guys are judging my spelling. I said that's too much information. I like the Spider-Man input, just make it shorter. And how about make it Thor this time? So you can have all of those fun conversations with it. Oh, let me look at the chat. And that's one of the ways that, Annalisa, I've started, and a lot of instructors for kind of the entryway into ChatGPT is tell students here, play with it and see what it produces and analyze the accuracies, inaccuracies. This is really a way of creative thinking. I've asked my students for every assignment to tell me how you used AI to respond to this. What was inaccurate? What was helpful in what you use this for? Or you can say, what was the response when you plugged in this assignment, and have it produce it? There's no reason why we can't find ways to embrace this in our teaching, but also help students to use it critically and explore that critical thinking that we all want students to do. All right, any other questions? You guys are so quiet. We can play around some more. We can put chat some different things. What would you guys like to see? Oh, there was one resource. I don't like to provide a lot of here are the best apps for this because it changes, and you can Google find me the best AIs. You can talk to AI, find me the best AI for making whatever it is that you want to do, and I'll put it in there. But here's one that had a good recent breakdown. I found some good ones for 2024 also on YouTube, but really AI is evolving so rapidly that any list that I'll create right now wouldn't be useful. If you're on social media, Facebook has a really great group called AI for Teachers or AI for Educators. People are always posting new AI that they've created or different curation of resources. I find some really cool ones there to be able to use. And you can add to conversations. I'm not sure why mine aren't loading up right now, but typically all of your conversations will be there. So when I was writing the grant the past couple of weeks, every time I would go back to that same conversation and just tell it, all right, I'm working back on this grant. I want you to remember all of the information that we've been talking about up until this point and apply it to the next set of questions that I'm going to give you. Does that make sense? And again, having that conversation to make sure you get the best answer possible.
Amanda, first of all, I just want to let everyone know that I did put the flyer for all of the other workshops in the chat. And then someone had a question. When guiding the AI, is it better to send another message to ChatGPT or edit the original prompt?
If it's gone very far off the rails, then typically I'll start another chat because I don't want that influencing the new and figure out ways to modify my prompt. Like if what it's produced is, oh, this is so out of left field, there's something wonkadoo in my prompt, then I'll start another chat and input it again, making sure I've changed it. If it's things that are just, oh, I see where it went wrong, I just need to tell it, no, I want you to do this format, then I'll just modify it. Like this, sometimes if you've had a lot of flippy floppies back and forth for this, I'll start another chat, put the prompt in again and start again. So it's not using all of that information that I plugged in to input it. My kids and my husband all have the same login for our ChatGPT account. And so sometimes everybody will be on the same chat and going, okay, it's gotten crazy now as far as training it.
I was just playing around with one in the background and I asked for the prompt you had about just a topic to teach in a creative way. So I asked about creating a thesis, but I put in a thesis topic, and so it brought all this crazy stuff that had nothing to do with the thesis statement. So I did start over because I know that sometimes when it's wrong, it's just better to start over. Otherwise, yeah, you get weird stuff. And even if you keep on saying, no, this is what I want, it goes back to the original one.
And again, I think about when you have a conversation with a person, or if you're in the outside looking at a conversation where you can see the conversation is going like this, and the two people are not connecting, it's easier. Okay, let's start again and level set. And that's the same thing as this.
Are there any questions for the last couple of minutes? Any thoughts? Anything else you want Amanda to teach us in the future?
And also, just in the last couple minutes, this whole presentation was used with a slide presenter app called Gamma app. It's free, it's easy. I just created my script and I used ChatGPT to plug in the script. I said, here are all the topics that I want to cover. Here's the conference or the description, because I also hate it when presentations don't go by the description. So make sure that it goes by. Here are the different quotes that I want to use. Here are the different prompts that I want to use. Create me a script. It created me a script. I took it, I read it over, tweaked it, changed it, plugged it into Gamma, and Gamma produced a PowerPoint that I went in and modified. I did have to modify it. It's not that fantastic. Oh, it is fantastic. But what is my use if I don't have to modify anything? So I went on and modified it, but Gamma's one, will it pull up my, I don't know why it's not pulling up my previous conversations.
So, Amanda, did you say you created the whole script ahead of time and then put it into Gamma and had it create the
AI created the script. So I just told it what I wanted to talk about, the description, the outcomes, just kind of had this back and forth dialogue, and then said, okay, now I want you to create me a script, and I want you to create also my notes for the presentation. So put on the PowerPoint what needs to be on the PowerPoint and what needs to be in the notes. And I plugged that into PowerPoint and it created this.
Wow, okay, because that is something I've wanted to do and I've tried it in other areas and it just hasn't worked.
Yeah, I mean, it's not fantastic. No, I shouldn't say that. It is fantastic, but it's not a plug and play. So I still had to go in and change things. Like you can see some of my notes that it had. It was in talking in third person. Amanda introduces what the audience with unique says. Like, that's not what I want for my notes. It's me talking.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, and for everyone for being here, and Susie for all of your help in getting this out to Fresno City people. And yeah, we have a lot of other exciting workshops this week and next week. And then we'll be doing some in-person work too. So yeah.
All right. Thank you everybody for coming. It's always nice when there's more than one person here. So yay.